Hold on to your horses, folks, or your hats. Things are about ready to get a lot more expensive. Hey, everybody, you're watching Bull, Boom, Bear Bust, back with another dose. Bull to the Bust, BX4 News, economic financial update here. Let's go ahead and get started. Well, we were promised a much lower cost of living, inflation coming down, which is really not what we need. We need deflation. Inflation coming down means things are getting more expensive, just at a slower pace. I think most of you know that, but I just have to repeat that because that's one of the biggest kind of talking points out there, is inflation coming down being a good thing. It's not a good thing. It's less worse than inflation going up faster, but it's not bringing the cost of living down. We need deflation. Of course, they can't allow deflation, therefore they have to keep these bubbles inflated. Now, there's a lot of talk out there, especially with the new administration, about how things are going to get cheaper. Everything's going to be more affordable. We're going to bring down the cost of this, that, everything, pretty much what they're saying. But not so fast, folks. It looks like things are already headed in the wrong direction. And let's go ahead and get started right here. And here's how some of the news outlets are framing what's happening right now. The plan to get rid of the many migrants that they're talking about getting rid of is already blowing up the food prices and the costs at these farms. They can't get people to come to work. Plans could blow up the food system and increase migrant labor. Instead of cutting back on undocumented migrants, the new administration will be forced to provide more visas to keep food flowing to the stores. They don't have enough people to do this work, is what they're reporting. Here's how they put it over at English News CN. Fear of deportation empties California's farm fields, threatening U.S. food prices. So, folks, I would brace for prices to get higher. You can't just make all these changes and not expect there to be some disruptions, right? So I would bank on things getting more expensive at the beginning. Maybe there'll be some sort of crash, collapse, black swan, like we've been talking about, which is a possibility. But for now, I think things are going to get more expensive. Now, there is one area where we want to look at today, and that's going to be housing and rents. Let's go ahead and jump over to this and see how really slow the market is, the housing market. Sales of existing homes rise in December, but 2024 was the slowest year for transactions in nearly 30 years, folks. Isn't this amazing? How are people in the real estate industry getting by? We already talked a couple months ago about how many tens of thousands of real estate agents already quit. They already took off for other occupations. But how much longer can people keep this as a career with transactions being at a 30-year low? Existing home sales rose 2.2% of the month. Okay, that's some good news compared to November. In December, to a seasonally adjusted 4.24 million, the strongest pace since February, according to the National Association of Realtors. Compared with the year earlier, sales rose 9.3%, the largest annual gain in over 3 years. But when you look at the big picture long term, for the full year of 2024, home sales hit the lowest level since 1995. That is not good news, folks. If you're working in the real estate industry, we're already seeing the effects on many businesses, especially the furniture stores, stores like Big Lots and other stores that we've seen get wiped out over the past few years with all this minimal transactions happening in the real estate industry. Now, some people will say, nothing's happening, nothing's changing, everything's still staying propped up. Well, prices are staying propped up, but things are happening. Look at the credit card situation, folks. We talked about this in a previous video, but here's another report here. It's becoming very widely known now what's happening. And even right here, even CBS News is talking about this. Record high number of U.S. credit card users only making the minimum monthly payments, folks. Record high. Okay, worse than the financial crisis. Record high. How much longer can this continue before we start seeing? Well, I shouldn't say start. We're seeing it. We're seeing it. We've seen homeless double in many cities over the past just 3 or 4 years. We're seeing, of course, the debt levels. People having to go on strike to demand higher pay because their pay is just not keeping up with the cost of everything right now. The defaults, the delinquencies, all the forgiveness programs. People are begging for student loans and everything else to be forgiven because people cannot maintain this. Sure, there's still going to be people out there. There's still the top 30% that are doing well. And I think these are probably the people that are filling up the football stadiums and packing all the nightclubs and restaurants. Of course, there's still a lot of people running up credit card debt going to these places. But my point is, you're still going to see economic activity as long as there's debt and money to be borrowed, as long as there's banks to loan money on a digital screen. This can continue for a very long time, but you'll continue to see the side effects or just the effects of what's happening. And next, with what's happening with the crops and the food distribution, or the picking of the cultivation of the food and the distribution of the food. A lot of these workers too in the meat packing plants and the food industry is really a big part of it is migrant labor. So we're going to see how this plays out, folks, but I see more inflation coming up ahead. And you thought they couldn't keep the housing market propped up? Look what they're doing. Look at this report right here out of Housing Wire, reporting what Redfin put out there. The data: home prices rose another 5.4% in 2024. What did I tell you right here? People told me I was wrong. People said the bubble has to go bust. Eventually, maybe something will poke the bubble, but we haven't seen that pin yet. We've seen a lot of risks that look like they could be pins, but the pin is not meeting the bubble, folks. This is the second smallest increase in home prices since 2013. Similar growth is expected in 2025. Of course, Redfin's going to say that. When would a company like Redfin or any company that's based on real estate come out and say, nope, home prices are going to drop, don't buy a home? I mean, with transactions already at a 30-year low, of course, they're going to try to make it look as good as possible. And who knows, these numbers could be cooked. It could involve a lot of incentives that sellers put out there. And remember, a lot of its prices getting bid up by big mega companies and billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar hedge firms and investment companies. So just because prices are rising doesn't mean everybody's doing well and has money. A lot of it's in big investors, and a lot of it's borrowed money. And the 2,000 plus down payment assistance programs across the United States are also helping a lot of people get into a home. Imagine how much lower it would be without all these things in place to keep this bubble inflated. It's already a 30-year low in transactions. It might be a 50, 100-year low. Who knows? Without all these ways to keep the markets propped up, to keep the housing bubble inflated, and to keep the markets overpriced. And I'm not joking at all. I think that we're going to see inflation go up. We even have this president right now. They're reporting right here, AP, demanding that interest rates come down. So basically, he wants to find more ways to keep the money flowing, keep the borrowed money getting into people's hands so they can go out and buy stuff, to keep the gross domestic product number moving in a positive direction. All right. Also, take a look at this. Someone earning over $100,000 could qualify for Seattle's affordable housing. Oh, sorry. Let me bring up the picture of it. Folks, would you ever have thought that you would see a situation where affordable housing, you make $100,000. Homes are so overpriced, you can make $100,000. Now, this is Seattle. This is not everywhere. But even if it's just in one city, this is absurd. $100,000, and you have to get affordable. You're qualifying for an affordable housing program. And Seattle's not even the most overpriced city. Sure, it's expensive, but there's other cities that are more expensive than Seattle. So if this is happening in Seattle, you don't have to be on a low income to know there's housing crunch in Seattle. In fact, nearly half of the households renting there around Seattle are rent burdened, meaning they pay more than 30% of their income for housing. That's even if they can find a house. And now there's going to be even more shortages with the 12, 13,000 homes wiped out here in Southern California. We've got fires here in San Diego. Thank goodness they're smaller fires. They've been maintained so far. But folks, things are just going to continue to get crazier. We've got the environment is all out of whack with all the chemicals, pollutants, all the billions and billions of people. Basically, the environment is just, it's messed up, and we're going to see more fires. We're going to see more droughts, more record hurricanes, more of this destruction of supply, and that's going to be another inflationary pressure on housing. I hope I'm wrong, Well, look back over the few years. Have I been wrong on very much? Not much. I said homelessness was going to get worse. I'm probably the only channel in all of YouTube land to say the housing bubble wasn't going to go bust. We were right about that. And some of these facts people don't like to hear. They'd rather go listen to somebody saying, yep, home prices are going to crash by 50% next year because the bubble's too big. It's got to crash sometime. Folks, if they keep doing what they're doing, it doesn't have to crash. If the pin doesn't meet the bubble, it doesn't have to crash. Do you understand? I don't like being right about this stuff, right? This is not good for people. People are probably hating me right now. They're probably leaving negative comments, thumbs down, because people want to buy a home. I understand. I was there. I wouldn't have bought a home if it weren't for the housing bust in 2008. I bought a home in 2010 and plus another investment home. If it wasn't for the bust, I would have never gotten into real estate, right? The boom's in the bust, right? Will there be a bust? Will there be a pin that meets the bubble, folks? With everything happening, please let me know. Where is the pin and how close is it to the bubble? Will it ever meet the bubble? Well, there's going to be something happen eventually that no one will say they saw coming, or the news will say nobody saw this coming. There's a lot of risks out there still. The fragility of the financial system, as I mentioned before, one missed derivative trade could bring the whole house of cards down, folks. One missed button push by a banker or a market manipulator somewhere, and you could see the banks go dark. You could see things collapse in an instant. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying that it is possible, right? Every time a crisis comes up, especially in the financial system, it's always some surprise that happens over the weekend. You wake up on a Monday, markets are down. Nobody saw this coming. The collapse of this institution, that institution. I think they're going to try to keep things propped up, but things can go wrong. And so be on the lookout for that. There's people out there hoping for things to go wrong. They're hoping for a crash because they feel like they're never going to get into the real estate game if there's not some sort of crash. The problem is the crash usually brings on a lot of other consequences, like job losses and a lot more. And moreover here's how the economists frame this, right? I've agreed with some stuff and disagreed with a lot of stuff out of the economists, but here's how they're framing it. Tariffs will harm America, not induce a manufacturing rebirth. So when you think about it, even if they do implement tariffs, and let's say that does incentivize companies to come back to the U.S. and manufacture here in the U.S., if the cost of living is so much here where they're going to have to pay their workers in the U.S. 2 times, 3 times, 5 times more than they would in some other country, maybe 10 times more, if you look at some of these other countries with they're paying ultra low labor costs, why would they bring their jobs back just to avoid tariffs, only to pay 4, 5, 6 times the labor that they could pay in some other country? And they have to pay the labor, otherwise people are going to go on strike. And do you think companies want to come to the U.S. when they see all these strikes happening? I even read the other day that Costco workers are not happy. They're going to be the next ones going on strike. Let's see, fresh news out. I didn't have this pulled up before I started filming here, so I just have to kind of frame it here. Costco employees details negotiations ahead of unions strike deadline. 18,000 Costco workers threaten to strike and won't work a day past January 31st if their contract demands aren't met. I've actually heard that Costco is a pretty good place to work. So here's another strike. How many companies want to come to a country where everybody's so debt burdened that they have to go on strike just to get enough pay, just to keep from getting evicted or to keep from getting foreclosed, right? It's crazy. So we're going to keep an eye on all this, folks. And, please make sure that you're subscribed, that you're up on all the latest news here. What do you think about the shortage of labor now with the farms because of what's happening with the not so legal people and everything else, folks? The home prices, the 30-year low in transactions in the housing market, $100,000 income still qualifying in Seattle for affordable housing. The demand that interest rates be lower sounds inflationary to me, folks. And again, I hope I'm wrong. But again, deflation also has consequences. We're going to see something happen. Things are going to continue to get crazier, and we're going to keep an eye on it for you. Please make sure you're subscribed. As always, keep stacking. Big love. Bye for now. Peace.